Welcome to another episode of the Creative Ops Podcast, where we follow our curiosity to explore emerging trends and bold possibilities that help us rethink what creative operations is and can be. In this conversation, we explore the impact that AI may have on what creative work is and how it gets done. We begin by unpacking my guest's provocative view that AI might drive offshore production to extinction by 2026, a bold claim that sets the stage for exploring how creative work itself is evolving. On this episode, I have the opportunity to speak with Penri Jones, a global leader in strategic innovation and creative production. He has over 24 years of experience transforming creative supply chains into globally streamlined, technology-driven enterprises. And now, as a founder of Adolesci, he's helping brands navigate the seismic shifts brought on by the AI revolution. And Penri doesn't shy away from those bold statements, and that led to a wide-ranging discussion. You'll hear about the economic disruption, why AI is fundamentally reshaping the business model of creative production, and what it means for agencies, brands, and creatives. We'll talk about transitioning from linear to modular, how brands can shift from traditional workflows to modular, AI-enabled storytelling that connects on a one-to-one level with consumers, and creative's true differentiator, why creativity and not technology will remain the ultimate competitive edge in an AI-driven world. We cover all that and much more. And remember, stay tuned after my interview with Penri for my reflection questions segment. Prompts to spark meaningful discussions with your team and challenge your own thinking. Penri Jones, welcome to the Creative Ops Podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Nish. Absolutely amazing to be here. So appreciate you having me on your show.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. As regular listeners may know, so this episode is going to come out right after one we dropped with Anil Noorani, who is with TKM Consultants, and we are Amnet. We're talking all about offshoring, which is an area he's got deep expertise in to allow in-house teams to scale creative production. And Penri, as you know, I've been fascinated by you, and I've had a couple of chats about how's AI going to change the world of creative production and creative in general. And you've been putting quite a few spicy takes on this up on LinkedIn that I've enjoyed reading. So today I want to have a discussion around, and one of those takes is AI is going to kill offshore production by 2026. And I think you're being purposefully hyperbolic in that. But maybe we can start with, tell us about your background, because you actually do come from the other side of the equation, and now you've gone over to the other side. So it's a little bit of like, maybe you're doing a bit of, Darth Vader here. You started off on, I don't know if you started off as Anakin and went to Darth Vader, you went Darth Vader and Anakin, however you would sort of characterize that, because you've been on both sides of the industry, and sort of paint a canvas of your background, who you are, your very cool company name, Adolesci. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I'm sort of putting in an Italian accent on that, I think, maybe. And paint a canvas of what you see going on in the world at the intersection of creative production and AI. And I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you some rope here. So just paint the picture, and then we will dive into the conversation.
Let's do it. Amazing. Thank you, Nish. I'm Penri Jones, and my journey into the world of creative production actually started in music. I studied composition in London with dreams of scoring films and games, but life had other plans, and I found myself drawn to the world of advertising production, where I spent the last 25 years leading global operations and transformation initiatives. So more recently, on the corporate side, I served as Global Chief Production and Innovation Officer at Hogarth, overseeing a team of more than 4,000 people across 35 countries. But what really shaped my perspective was a decade I spent living in India, pioneering offshore production models for Hogarth, for TAG and Williams D and other companies, and fundamentally changing how brands approach content production and delivering massive cost arbitrage and value and scalability for how production is being serviced. And I've witnessed firsthand the evolution of our industry through several distinct phases. We started with simple geographic arbitrage, just trying to find a more cost-effective ways of producing content. Then we saw the rise of true expertise in offshore locations, handling increasingly complex creative work. This led to a period of commoditization and consolidation, where scale and efficiency became the driving forces. I think now we're entering what I believe to be the most transformative phase yet, the convergence of AI and creative production. And that's why I recently completed my master's in AI and business at Oxford, and why I founded Arlosi Consulting. And Nish, you might, many people struggle with it with naming. Actually, it's Arlosi because it's Welsh for innovation, but Arlosi is kind of it's kind of where we landed on it. But the traditional models that served us well for decades are being disrupted, and brands need expert guidance to navigate this change. And the challenge isn't just implementing AI or new technology. It's fundamentally rethinking how we create, adapt, distribute content at scale. It's about finding the right balance between automation and creativity, between efficiency and quality. And through my work with global brands and agencies, I've seen both the immense potential and the significant pitfalls of this transformation. So I think we're at a crucial inflection point in our industry. The content supply chain of the future will be more integrated, more automated, more intelligent than ever before. But success requires more than just adopting new tools. It requires holistic understanding of the creative processes, tech, and more importantly, how to bring people along on this journey. And that's the expertise I believe I bring to the table. And that's why I'm passionate about sharing this with others in our industry. And maybe just to close off, it's an interesting point you made around, have I now become Darth Vader or am I Anakin? I think depending on who you speak to within my contact list, I think I spent my entire career really has been built on and depends by building offshore solutions for major brands, for the big production companies. So I've been probably the most vocal proponent of offshoring over the last 20 years in the industry. One of them, along with people like Anil and the guys. So to now turn around and start talking about, as you said, well, the impact of AI on offshore production is fairly fundamental. For me, this is not about one thing or the other. It's about the next disruption. So I think offshore was a disruption. I think scale production consolidation in offshore was a disruption. I think the upskilling of offshoring centres is a disruption. And AI is the next one, but AI is fairly fundamental because it changes the economic base behind the model in its entirety. So
So you've talked a lot about, like, in your articles about how this is going to disrupt offshore, but AI is just going to disrupt creative production, right? Whether it's done offshore or it's done in-house, and you've got an in-house production studio, it is going to refactor how creative production is done. And even beyond that, you sort of had multiple layers there. It's going to refactor creative production. It's going to refactor how the content supply chain is built and operates and how it's maintained and optimized over time. I think we're going to see that with intelligent AI agents quickly coming online. And we'll keep this fairly high level. We won't go too down the nerd rabbit hole, so to speak. So we're really talking about the whole creative process is going to get refactored. And I think that's what we should all keep in mind. I'm a proponent of believing that it's going to be refactoring, and through that job dislocation and reorientation and blending versus job destruction. I think the destruction will come for an individual or a team if they don't adapt to these new realities. But if you do adapt to them, then I think there's like exponential opportunities that come out of this. So let's talk about that a little bit, and we'll get back to the offshoring folks and just external agencies in general, because that's an area that's ripe with a lot of recent developments, as we're all aware of.
Yeah, I think you're right to frame it that way. I think that AI is almost like the advent of the desktop computer again, for the next generation of that inputs, where the fundamentally how the creative and production and media process was thought about is changing again, and we're in that moment in time, or the period in time, where the existing ways of working, the existing ways of thinking are being disrupted.
And what I wanted to ask you about, because so you were on the other side. You were on companies like Hogarth and Tag, and you helped to like either stand up or scale their operations. You spent 10 years in India, which is 10 years longer than I've spent there. I think I've spent 10 days there and planning on going back next year. But it's so you saw that side, and I would imagine those businesses grew quite substantially during a short period of time as brands were looking to scale content, and they're looking to do it at speed, have that sort of round the clock availability, and they're in search of cost efficiency. And so scale, speed were limiting factors. And the answer was, oh, Hogarth and Tag were going to step into that. And you were just talking about something that made me think, like, with AI, we're living in a time where scale is infinite, speed is infinite, even knowledge and intelligence is infinite now. And is that sort of like the new realities that you're seeing your clients and organizations sort of like maybe having a bit of a hard time wrapping their heads around? Because it sort of fundamentally changes the whole arithmetic of how we work and what value is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe two big things there. One around, I guess, the disruptive waves that's been affecting production from the very big that created the opportunity for the likes of Tag and Hogarth. So the concept of agency disintermediation and decoupling of production from agencies and centralizing them within Tag and Hogarth initially, and then the others that came along, and then the next wave of disruption came around on the need to drive that at greater scale. And I think that greater scale demands from brands is really the key thing. I think this is at the heart of the real opportunity, because fundamentally the ask for brands is, well, look, I need to be able to produce more and more content, more relevant content, more personalized content across ever increasing range of growing channels. And I think that is ultimately the challenge of where AI can help. That is where there's this large bottleneck of largely human-centric vertical or silo within production, as we call it. All of a sudden, we can solve a significant part of that through automation and a smarter thinking, a smarter AI, and actually enable modular contents, more personalized content, and start to change the game far more upstream to creativity, which is still the key, the real differentiator. But everything along the chain ultimately is a technology, so therefore a commodity. The real differentiator will always be the creativity, and I think that's somewhat lost in the hyperbole around AI at the moment. I think mainly because the opportunity is huge for disruption, for savings, for brands. I'll come on to your brand point very soon, but I think everyone sees the disruption opportunity, the change opportunity, and what it means. But really, once this all levels out over the next decade or so, the real differentiator is still going to be the creative, and how the creative then is adapting to the technology and the opportunity, the creative constraints, but also the creative opportunity that comes with this technology. And I think to your maybe the latter more pointed question, I think helping with this agencies or helping brands navigate this is extremely challenging. I think the concepts are fairly clean. The solutions are actually quite clean, but to be able to to use your analogy, change the wings of an airplane while they're still flying for a major global brand is extremely challenging as a concept. So, and I talk a lot about the business model reasons and the personal reasons why some of the agencies don't embrace this change. I think you have a similar thing on the brand side, where there's a lot of risk involved in embracing a fairly fundamental transformation, especially when it's untested. So there's almost the sort of looking around to who's going first, who's making the big changes, what can we pick up, and what tends to happen now. And I'm seeing this more and more with the brands I'm currently working with, where they have asked their agencies, or they've directly intervened and brought in different AI or emerging tech solutions, and they've dropped them into existing workflows without reinventing the workflows. So, and in some cases, it's actually things cost more money. And maybe deliberately so sometimes without being too provocative around that. But the reality is it's for brands to really get the most out of this. It needs a fundamental transformation around their content supply chain, and really looking at it from a very independent point of view that's removed from the current business models of the agencies.
So there's so much to pick up on there, and thank you for that. So one is 100% agree that creativity is the differentiation, and it will be. And that's why I wish the conversation and the narrative was less about the fear of, is AI going to take my job? And I think the conversation has to be more about, like, again, around refactoring and how this actually enables and elevates the need for creativity and storytelling more than ever before. And, for the creatives out there who are listening, I feel like over the last 10, 15 years, creativity and storytelling has sort of gotten lost because everyone's been slaves to the algorithms of the, ad networks and the social platforms and things like that. So one, I think it's an opportunity for all that to come back. I do want to dive into the business model and things like that, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. Tell us a little bit about, like, so you're saying you're seeing brands drop these technologies, these AI-enabled creative production technologies into existing workflows, and sometimes where agencies are still in the mix. Like, but we hear a lot of people out there, like the narrative right now is AI is ready for prime time. No, AI is not ready for prime time. But for somebody that's in the middle of it, like, tell us a little bit about, like, is it ready for prime time? Like, what is it capable of doing today from a creative production point of view? And what is it still sort of at the experimental stage and still figuring it out stage?
So I think this is where it's useful to talk about AI, but actually sometimes it becomes a problem. So really what we're talking about is emerging tech and how AI is being used or applied within that emerging tech. And I think so within, if I look at going back to maybe the narrative around why I think offshore creative production scopes as they currently stand are under threat, they can look at adaptation and versioning workflows. There are tools coming out there today that can fundamentally redo that across every channel, whether it's banners, whether it's video, whether it's, so the whole language piece, the cut downs, the product swaps, the formatting, shape sizes, it can all automate that at scale. Now, some of this stuff has been available for years and not necessarily with the AI. What AI is starting to do, particularly around AI image generative, is to create some of the content as well. So all of a sudden, I think if you look at, there's another theme I've been talking about more recently, which I'm not sure you picked up on, is I think the photo shoot is dead in terms of outside of things which are talent led or even, let's say, food led. I think the idea of photography, lifestyle photography, is starting to move away quite rapidly, and particularly when brands become more used to more control over the ethical and legal constraints around AI, humans, and things like that, then that starts to become a real opportunity. So I think, certainly, I'm seeing tools emerging, and I'm working with a number of different providers at the moment who have the tools at the moment to fundamentally disrupt what is a $5 billion industry around adaptation and versioning. And when I'm talking about disrupt, I'm talking about 80% sort of shifts in terms of savings and how it's being approached. And that's fundamentally coming back to maybe one of the original questions you had, Nish, around why do I think offshore as it is today is under threat? And I think without pivoting the question too much towards that, I think it's quite important. So I think many of these companies have been treating offshore as the lower quality, the more commoditized activity, without embracing the real opportunity of the talent availability in these markets. And I think that's something I'm feeling very, very passionately about, into having lived out, particularly in India, and been to these other places. So what's happened is there are teams of thousands and thousands of people who are they're compositing ads different shapes, sizes, and formats, and different languages from spreadsheets largely, and doing it largely on a manual basis unless they're able to control certain campaigns and brand guidelines within the times that they've been given. So that's why I think that large swathes of these operations are under threat. However, I think I've touched upon in my comments back to Neil's podcast. I think there's a real opportunity for these brands to actually turn that into a positive by looking at the talent markets in these areas and start to really embrace more of a global resourcing model that starts to use the real creative and the data and the strategy and innovation talent that's readily available in places like Manila, like South America, like particularly India with its digital talent base as well.
So, sorry to interrupt, but you're again giving us a lot, and I want to make sure we, for the listeners, we sort of peel away at some of these layers. So one is, if I'm understanding you correctly, there are tools that are ready for prime time, very North American term, albeit, and they're being deployed today to do things like, to use your terminology, commoditized work. I often refer to it as sort of like algorithmic work, in that you could do it in a step-by-step process. There's a deterministic output, and you could just keep doing it over and over again. You could sort of put people into the process and they can quickly get sort of trained up on it because we know the steps we have to go through and we know what the output needs to look like. And that's sort of where AI is probably good at today.
Not necessarily, no. I think that probably describes automation over the last 10, 15 years.
Okay.
So I think all of this is very dependent on template building. I think if I was to maybe simplify the change is that the need for very strict and very well-defined brand mechanics and well-defined templates are starting to move away with AI. I think AI is able to fill in the gaps where there isn't precision by using trained data. So all of a sudden we're moving away from having to absolutely dot the I's across the T's in terms of process automation or even RPAs into something that's more not intelligence based, and that's just purely on shapes, sizes, formats. So being able to get the adaptation piece, as I said, the localization bit as well. Then, but by being able to create hyper personalized imagery on demand without having to go to a photo shoot, without having to go and capture every single variant you might want to capture, or go to every market to capture every talent that you need to capture. The ability of that to, or even, I think a very, very pertinent and very relevant example around AI voiceovers and audio. One of the partners I work with at the moment, one of the leaders in this space, where we're taking from a 2-week traditional process of creating a localized voiceover, we can get done and mixed and into the final edit within minutes with a quality level that is equally what you expect, particularly if the brand has signed off the voice already.
So how do you, you use the word training? What kind of level of effort in terms of time and investment goes into training these systems? Because you said the advantage is you don't have to do that automation training anymore, but you still have to give it context. It's intelligence, but you need to give it knowledge and information so that it can it can still deliver the outputs you need, do it at a much quicker pace, as you're explaining. But what does that sort of investment of time look like?
I think it's less investment of time. I think this is where the larger companies have an advantage, and it's going back to the old trope around data being king, or data being the real value of an organization. So you've got a number of these large agencies holding immense amounts of client data around what a brand's content should look like. That is training material. That's incredible training material that can ultimately create a brand engine for content production. And underpin the creative process.
So all these external agencies who have been doing this production work for their clients, they've got this rich set of data of what before and after looks like. Do they have the data that can fuel that intelligence? And one thing, you and I've talked about offline, and I've talked to others in the creative production world about is, and I'm fascinated by, like, data is the fuel for AI ultimately. Without the fuel, AI goes nowhere. It's like a car without gas. You're not going to navigate it anywhere. Who owns this data now? And isn't that the opportunity for external agencies to almost to be able to stand up like an AI creative production stack? Because they've got years, if not decades, of this data.
So that is the question: who owns that data? Is it the agency or is it the brand? And
Right.
should the agency be allowed to train their model on that brand material? And I think that's a very grey area. I think it can be done in collaboration with the brands, but the brand increasingly brands want ownership of that data and control of that data. So it's a grey area.
So I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question or not, and I'll ask it. Perhaps it's impolite, but you've been on both sides. Traditionally, when contracts are negotiated, has this been part of the discussion, or was nobody thinking of this like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even like 2 years ago, pre-ChatGPT popping up on everyone's browser?
Well, I think it was covered in some ways. There's data retention, and then provide when a contract changes hands from one agency to another, there's that fee that can be baked in to facilitate that transfer. I don't think anybody truly thought about it in terms of these are not just assets that we have, visual assets. We actually have valuable data around that we can actually use in the future. And I think that's something that's been more of a newer thought over the last 4 or 5 years, but I've yet to see a contract that has baked that in.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because you're right. It's a huge gray area. I believe data is going to end up being a financial asset on the balance sheet and it's going to be fueled by this tectonic shift called AI, and everybody realizing, like, people have been saying data is the new oil for the last decade, but now people are going, oh, I actually need the oil to run the engines that are going to be at the heart of operating my business and innovating in everything we do. And just like how much a barrel of oil is, people are going to want to know how much does that barrel of data cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think if we really break it down in the agency world, I think the two everything else is a commodity. Everything else can be replicated. The two differentiators are the first party data and creativity. That's where winning sits in terms of the more you can leverage out of first party data, and obviously the more creative you can be within the tool sets which are emerging, and the more you can be effective for brands, particularly the shift from linear. I know I'm pivoting again here, but it's quite an important point. I think the shift from linear creative thinking to modular creative thinking, and doing that in a very specific way that's tied into the technology stack that's been put down the runway, is fairly critical, and actually a fairly big shift for creatives to think about, because again, I think it won't just be a creative conversation. There'll be a conversation between a group of, let's say, creative directors or creative technologists, a content strategist, and a planner, and that all of a sudden those three people coming together to understand, okay, what's the technology roadmap? Technology runway. What are the limitations? What are the opportunities within it? And how do we build a creative, for want of a better word, campaign that can drive that really effective personalization? And it's a very different way of thinking, and I've struggled to really connect with creatives who buy into that idea, who want to buy into that idea.
Yeah, let's. I want to talk about modular and Lego blocks, actually. But before that, just one more thing on data for the listener. We've got creatives, creative operations leaders. We even have folks from the marketing side, and yes, folks from the agency side who maybe are rolling their eyes as you and I are talking through this episode. But the data is important to like think about more so than ever before, because AI is going to get woven into every part of the creative process. It is going to um, be the fuel that um, it is going to be the fuel for the intelligence that is going to get woven through everybody's content supply chains, to be able to operate at scale and speed and precision. To your point of, to be able to do personalization at the right time in the right way, to the down to the individual. So I think anyone listening, like, data isn't the domain of the nerds in the corner. It is like, as you're evaluating new technology, you need to be thinking about, like, where's the data coming from, where is it going, and before we get back to modular and Lego blocks, you've mentioned business model a couple of times. Like, data is going to be, I think, one of those determinants of, does the work keep going out, does it all come back inside? Because like, there's proximity to data, so there's first party data, and do we want to let it go out the door? Do we know for sure we're going to get it back? Because we don't have like data on the blockchain or anything like that yet. That'll come in the next 10 years. And also there's all these privacy regulations. Can we send this data out so that our external partner, who may have an amazing AI stack, can leverage that data for that scale, speed, precision, but we have all these privacy laws to contend with? Will that be another influencing factor in pulling the work back in-house?
I think so. I think it's primarily driven by value, the value of the data, and the more first-party data that can be captured, the more valuable it is, and therefore more effective brands can be. So I think that if we look at the restrictions around why it hasn't happened so far, I think the production bottleneck has been insurmountable in terms of the sort of scale required to service a global brand. It just doesn't make sense for a brand to traditionally do it the traditional way, especially with the demand for more and more content across more and more channels. It's a impossible game to play on the current traditional model. I think the second piece is around the media buying piece, the aggregated spend around media buying, and the value around that the big media companies had in doing that. That's starting to disintermediate into the big platforms. So all of a sudden, I can't remember the exact stats, but I think it's around 70% of the spend media spend in the US effectively is across Alphabet, Meta, Apple, and TikTok and Trade Desk. So all of a sudden, I think there's a better way potentially to do that. So those two things are driving, I think, a better disintermediation of media and production and creative, and allows brands to bring it on board. I think you then bring a really interesting question into play there. So, well, okay, not everything will be in-house. There's an element of expertise, freshness, creative insights, innovation that brands will need to engage with. So then, what is that modular engagement model look like? And if there's that room for that sort of smaller, more agile innovative shop to be able to plug in, whether it's from a technology side or whether it's from a service side. And I think that's the fascinating piece, and that's something I'm talking to a client about specifically at the moment, about how does it look at its vendor ecosystem to internalize as much as is possible, but still have the best in class of what the market offers, while still capturing and owning its own first party data.
Yeah, it's a whole interesting set of new opportunities and challenges to work through, which is what I think what makes this time very exciting. And I think the business model is going to be again, one of the big X factors in how the whole ecosystem plays out. What comes back in, what goes out, how do in-house teams and external teams work together, and what is the new model? And if we sort of go back in time to when outsourcing, offshoring really started at scale, it's because all the work was being done in-house, or maybe more to the point, it couldn't be done in-house at the scale and speed that brands needed and wanted to go to market. But they understood the limitations and they understood the time and the cost it took to do that work in-house. So they then had an idea as to what they needed their external partners to do. And then all these businesses like Hogarth and Tag got stood up and they scaled over time. But if the underlying economic model of all this is changing, if scale and speed are infinite now, which again, I think that's going to take time for everyone to wrap their minds around, because humans are built around a scarcity mindset. And now we have infinite abundance, which might be redundant to say, but it's infinite abundance. Is that another factor sort of that you think will force things back in-house so the in-house teams can figure out how do we actually need to operate in this new world of infinite scale and speed with these AI tools? And then at some point, we go back externally, because we don't necessarily need to have that as a best-in-class capability internally.
Yeah, I think there's different drivers to that. I think without echoing too much of the content I put through my newsletters, I just don't see any agency or holding company of a sufficient scale hasn't changed their business model to embrace the level of change their brand actually needs. Whereas, one of the things I'm talking to brands about at the moment is that you can break the cycle by bringing it in-house. Now, you can bring it in-house with these partners, but all of a sudden it changes the model towards a managed service model. So where the technology is defined, the processes are defined, and what you're buying in is expertise at managing that at scale and across all the different channels, and being able to bring in. And I think that's a way of being able to trigger this disruption and transformation, because what I've seen time and time again, as much as the agencies talk about it, some of them who position themselves as even AI first agencies simply don't do it, because they do have significant, in fact, majority of their business tied into the existing business models of time and materials.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I want to come back to modular and Lego blocks, and this is also sort of the broader context is going back to the fear that everyone's feeling of, like, is AI replacing creativity? Is AI going to replace my job? I think the reality is like we have to be open and transparent about, like, AI is here. It's not going away. It's going to get woven into everything. I actually think of AI as, like, for myself, I think of it as sort of a new entity. I even call it a new species, and which I think is a good way of, like, reinforcing AI is going to change everything. It's going to get embedded everywhere. There's, like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And when I think about the creative process and the content supply chain, it's starting today where it should start, sort of on that production side, because a lot of that work can be algorithmically driven, which is what AI is really good at. And I think AI is good at scaling at speed the content and the brand and the stories of yesterday and today, because it can get trained on it, it can understand it, and it can apply intelligence to it to create what we need, whether it's translation or whatever have you. You've given us a couple of examples. But what AI is not good at is creating tomorrow, the stories of tomorrow. And I have not yet experienced AI being good at emotion. And that's why I think, like, we should invite, using AI across the entire creative process in the ways that make sense. And I loved your word modular, because I often use the term Lego blocks. The world I see moving ahead is that I think we almost need to think about the creative process across the content supply chain as, like, two intertwined paths. There's the scale path, the scale and speed path, an optimization path, which sort of speaks to your precision around personalization, and then a storytelling path. And AI can be a partner in both. I think for scale, speed, precision, optimization, it leads. And what it is doing at scale, speed, precision, optimization is scaling the stories that the humans are coming up with. And I actually think this world we are now entering into, storytelling, as I said previously, matters more than ever before. And the storytellers can live in a world of, they will have these modular or Lego blocks of being able to generate different creative components. And those creative components could be images, videos, copy, graphics, headlines, whatever have you. And then I see a world of, and I've mentioned this on the podcast once or twice before, but it's almost like Keanu Reeves in the Matrix. It's like Neo. So the Spielberg of every brand is going to be like Neo in the Matrix when he finally fully locks into the Matrix and he can see everything. And what's coming at him is just this like tsunami of all these creative Lego blocks, all these components that he or she can now start to pick out of the sky and start to configure into stories wrapped in emotions that are going to pierce through the tsunami of scaled commoditized content and create a connection with that individual. So creativity is going to matter more than ever before. I think creators should be inviting AI in to help them with ideation. And I think we should be ready for a world of, like, Spielberg's on set and he's got a battalion of people around him, like cinematographers, photographers, second unit directors and all this. And I know I'm rambling, going on a bit here, but I'm really passionate about this idea of like AI is going to unlock creativity and great storytelling at scale. But what do I know? What do you think?
No, I think exactly the same thing. I'll probably go one further because if we look at the real problem is around creating that connection. We've gone from a very broadcast way of thinking many years ago to looking at creating audience segmentation and cohorting. I think what AI enables us to do because of infinite scale and speed, as you define it, which I quite like, is actually that moving increasingly and realistically to that one-to-one storytelling conversation with consumers. And I think that's the really interesting bit. How does it? It's not just how do we apply creativity and modular contents to traditional campaign thinking, which is largely where everybody is at the moment. Really is okay. How do we leap forward to, as you said, storytelling, and how do we leap forward to individual storytelling between a brand and a consumer? And I think that's almost the goal and the opportunity on a brand level with AI, given infinite scale and infinite speed. But you're right, so underpinned fundamentally then, as you said, by a kick-ass creative who knows how to do that.
Yeah, and I'm going to connect a couple of things you said. So I'm walking away from that, like with storytelling personalization, because I think the personalization we've done over the last 5-10 years, quite frankly, has been like more spammy and stalkery than anything else. It's like, oh, great, you put my name at the top of the email you sent to me, or, I did X, Y, and Z, but it feels like you're almost following me. And it didn't feel valuable, but stories that you can put me into with your brand as part of it, that would be a great personalization experience, because humans are, I often say stories are the original algorithms, and humans are story driven animals. And again, I think for like creatives, and I've been using the term real creatives because I think we use the term like creatives very broadly. I'm talking about those that actually want to tell stories to create emotional connection with the audience. That to me is being creative. And it could be through whatever medium you want, but that's creativity. It's not, with all due respect, translating something from English to Spanish.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's nerd out a little bit in our last few minutes on other things going on in the industry. And we weren't planning on talking about this, but you wrote another spicy article on the recent announcements around with Omnicom and IPG and creating this mega agency holdco, and everybody's been speculating on why is it driven by AI, and I sort of go back to, like, they're bigger now, and scale used to be a competitive advantage, like, full stop. But if scale truly is infinite in this AI world, then this, like, why do they do it?
Yes, it's an interesting one. Obviously, quite fresh. I think the scale of the media buy is always going to be compelling, and still is for a while. I think it's not. I touched on earlier about the arguments around disintermediation in that space, and that's almost inevitable. I think one of the key stats I brought out is the leap from, I think, in the last 5 years from in the US, so agency media spending from going with the holding companies from 45% to 29%. So there's a was that you or me?
That's my doorbell, but that's okay
Okay.
for anyone listening. We're recording from home, so
so, I wasn't sure if that's you or me. Sounds like mine. Um, Off my track there a little bit. So I think, yeah, it's there's inevitability around the consolidation in this space. But the reality is I don't think it's the holding companies who are changing the game. The story of the article is around the tech companies. And the whether it's the platforms, the impact of AI, as we've discussed today, and also the impact of in-housing. I think those three things are what are really changing the landscape of the agency space. So I think as part of that journey, as these holding companies and larger agencies deal with the realities of the triple threat problem that I talk about, there will be consolidation, and there would be maybe some interesting movements towards the consulting firms or the platforms themselves.
okay, that's an interesting take. We'll see how it plays out. I mean, certainly it's such a large merger. It's not gonna, integration is not gonna happen overnight.
Well,
And
without kind of speaking too flippantly, I think the last thing I would say holding companies to do right now is to figure out how to integrate two giants like that, as opposed to how do they figure out the triple threat or platforms, AI, the immediacy of AI and the impact of AI, and the threat of in-housing. So I think there's while everybody's going to be jostling for seats at the table, and who owns which brands, and which brands get consolidated, and which agencies get consolidated, and which ones get survive. I think maybe that's going to be distracting senior leadership away from what the real problem is.
yeah, to me, it sort of feels like my doctor just told me I need to lose weight, and instead of going to the gym, I decided what I need to do over the next 30 days is get the right outfits to go to the gym, instead of, like, no, just go to the gym. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. You need to, like, get healthier, or else.
Yeah.
It's So I'm going to ask you to think about something while I'm just sort of, like, commenting on sort of the journey we've been on today. Is like, if I'm an in-house agency leader, I've listened to this episode. We might be or might not be working with an external partner for scale in terms of content production, or we've got our own content production studio. What are the questions I should be asking myself and talking to my team about? But before we get there, it's like, really, for the listeners, we've been on sort of a interesting journey today. We've touched on quite a few topics, and obviously this is all rooted in AI is going to change everything. We're starting to see it, and you shared some examples on the creative production side, and it's really changing the math of, like, the whole creative process. And certainly it's already having an impact on the creative production side of the equation. And I think in-house agency leaders need to be having conversations with themselves, their team, their leadership, even their external partners about what does the road ahead look like. there might be a case for continuing to work with the external partners, especially if you can't leverage AI capabilities internally for, there's like IT issues and legal issues to work through. So that might be almost like outsourcing your AI journey for a short period of time. But what is the long-term plan? Are you going to bring it back in-house? Does AI give you the ability to have like a production studio in a box to do it much more cost effectively and redeploy those dollars across other parts of the creative process? And yes, AI is coming to every part of the creative process, and we touched on it lightly today. And I think Keanu Reeves in The Matrix as a storyteller is going to be part of the future. And I think if I were creative, if I were a storyteller, I'd be excited about that. But so Penri, help wrap us up here. Like, you work with a lot of brands. You've been on the other side of the equation. You've had conversations with agencies, with the holdcos. If I'm an in-house agency leader or creative ops leader, what are give us the 2-3 questions I should be thinking about and asking myself to, and also to spur a conversation with my team.
Yeah, I think the first one is around how are we solving the scale personalized content piece for our clients. How is that being solved? Is it being solved traditionally? Is it being solved by technology? Is it being outsourced to another vendor that's not part of the chain? I think that's the key one in terms of being able to control that. Because that started to answer that question focuses the attention around ultimately then on how does media, creative and production come together at the beginning once you solve that distribution question. So I think that's probably the most important question is how are we distributing or creating this final content to our brands? And are we truly solving the scale piece? And then the questions then around how are we embracing modular content? How are we embracing modular storytelling and the ability to do that? And then then the third one then is how are we educating your brands to embrace this, to maximize this? And as part, so you touched upon this a little bit, but as part of the reason why I set up our LOSI, I think the challenge half of our clients are brands, half of our clients are agencies, actually in-house agencies specifically, where they're looking for that sort of independent point of view, where somebody's not trying to sell them a service or sell them an offshore piece or sell them a technology. They're looking for somebody to come in and say, well, look, this is what's happening in the market. Here are the opportunities. Here are the suite of technologies. Here are we can work with your vendors. We can bring you new vendors, whatever it might be. But I think that role of the independent innovation consultant is starting to really grow. And I would say that naturally, because that's what I do. But it's fundamentally the reason why I went down this path, because I could see everybody needs our support, whether it's the big holdcos who I'm talking to, whether it's the in-house agencies who I'm talking to, or the brands. Obviously, the brand conversation is the super interesting one, because I think that's where real transformation can happen.
I agree with you. So those are good questions to start off with. And I'll add one more to that if I could, because you made me think that, the technology is the easy part. Actually, AI is the easy technology, as I often say. The messy technology are humans. And through all this change, what is going to happen, and it always does, but it's just the scale and speed at which it's going to happen, is the job refactoring. And I already see it starting to, it's starting with job blending. So you're familiar with tools like Pencil and Creatopy that allow you to AI tools that allow you to scale your creative for bottom of funnel programmatic advertising. And I'm already starting to see these conversations and these challenges around, who runs this tool, and who is it? Marketing? Is it creative? Is it the paid media team? And it's all starting to blend. And that is going to be a critical X factor, success factor, or that's going to make or break how well you adopt and thrive with AI. It's going to be the people component, and this is already starting to happen. So if you're out there, you're listening, you're going, we're starting on our journey, we're starting to ask ourselves questions. The people questions are going to be critical, and that's why I think folks like yourself and others who are out there need to be part of these conversations to spur those conversations or those questions that are going to be uncomfortable to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched upon something that we talk about quite a lot as part of our engagements. Yes, technology, yes, innovation, yes, AI disruption, and the why. We spend a lot more time talking about change management and people. Because that's really that's what brings success, and how do you transform an organization, transform a supply chain, particularly with multiple vendors who may not be correctly incentivized initially to do so. So change management is a major factor, and the people factor is a major factor. But that's the thing. I think we've seen it a couple of times so far, where we bring people on that journey. I think the job, the complementarity opportunities in terms of jobs, yes, jobs disappear, but actually this productivity creates more opportunity for more ways of thinking and more ways of engaging. And I think that's where that's where we see that big opportunity.
Yeah, I've actually, and I'll wrap up on this just because I can't help myself. I've got a pet peeve with the term change management these days because I think it actually does a disservice to the scale of change that we are in for. Like, change management is our grandfather's CRM system getting implemented or updated or something, and I think this is much more dramatic. I think we're almost all like Magellan in back whenever it was like the 1400s or 1500s, going, hey, that Galileo guy over there said the world is round, so if we start from here we should be able to get back to here. But we don't have a complete map or fancy GPS or anything like that. It was but we have to go, we have to figure this out, and I think we're all Magellan getting onto the ship called AI. And and that's why the conversations are so important to me. The conversations are the compass to figure out how to navigate from here to there.
Yeah, I would almost simplify it a bit more by talking about aligned incentives.
Yeah,
I think one of the biggest challenges right now, particularly right now, is complete misalignment in incentives between the service providers and the brands.
yeah,
And I think sometimes I lay the blame on this, and maybe I shouldn't do this openly here, but our procurement store, because they always love to be able to compare apples to apples. All of a sudden, we've now got an apples to aardvark comparison,
yes,
and therefore it's very in terms of model change, and
yeah,
therefore it's extremely difficult. So I think while I'm very aware of the industries I've worked for, want to make that shift to value-based, performance-based gain share models, innovation-based models, which incentivizes the industry to deliver year-on-year value as opposed to a snapshot rate card value. The resistance tends to be on the brand side. So I think there's work to be done on the brands in terms of aligning incentives, and again, that's part of, dare I say, change management of what needs to happen.
all right, well, I might bleep out that last change management. Yeah, but Penri Jones, thank you very much. Fascinating conversation. It is not over. We'll have to have you back at some point for an update on the state of everything, and tell us where people could find out more about our Alessi and the innovation work you folks do.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, thank you. So I think it's probably the best way to stay in touch with us is through LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out to me. We're very accessible. As myself and a relatively small team of people, we publish an article every week, which can be quite insightful, provocative. Have a look at that newsletter. But yeah, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn and say hello.
All right, fantastic. We'll make sure we include links to your LinkedIn profile and newsletter in the show notes. Thank you again very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Hey folks, Nish back again with my reflection question segment. So if you've listened to one of these before, this is where I share 2, 3, 4 questions out of a list of usually anywhere from 10 to 30. So after I have my conversation with my guest, in this case, Penri Jones, I take a couple of days and, whether it's on my walks in the shower, having my coffee quietly in the morning, these are the questions that I write down. So I go from like talking and listening mode with the guest to thinking mode. And the questions help me sort of prompt myself to think about like, what should I be asking myself and what should I be thinking about doing next? And I hope these are valuable for you so that you could go from like listening mode, which I greatly appreciate, to thinking mode. And it could be these are questions you're maybe asking yourself to challenge your own thinking or reframe how you're currently doing things, or to prompt discussions with your team or your leadership, and then that acts as a launching pad into doing mode. So I'm going to share a couple of things, a couple of those questions with you today. One is, as you just heard in the conversation with Penry, he had that bold, bombastic, and self-admittedly a bit of a purposefully bombastic claim that offshore production is going to be extinct by 2026. He doesn't truly believe that, but AI is changing fundamentally the math of what creative work is, how it gets done, and who does it, especially on the production side of things. So one of the questions I'm left asking myself is AI the new outsourcing? Is AI the new offshoring? And should that lead me as a brand, as an in-house agency leader, as a creative operations leader, to think differently about how I might be using external partners, whether it's agency, offshore production centers, or anybody else, as part of my creative or content supply chain? I think at the very least, even if you're not ready to make that change today, it's prompted me to start to rethink about, what is the role that these external partners are going to play? And candidly, in some of the offline discussions I've had with many agencies and folks in the outsourcing and offshoring world, it's a question they're asking themselves as well. Because as we talked about in this episode with Penry, the math, AI is going to change the math of what creative work is, how it gets done, and who does it. And it's all sort of rooted in a change of the economic model because AI is going to enable much more scale at speed and much more cost efficiently over time. So, is AI the new outsourcing? Something I'm thinking about, something perhaps you should be thinking about. And this might be a great question to prompt a discussion with yourself, your team, your leadership. Another thing I'm thinking about is sort of rooted in something you've heard me talk about on this podcast over the last 18 months. This whole idea of like scale and storytelling is sort of two different but intertwined, deeply intertwined creative workflows. And we talked on this episode about, how AI in theory will be able to scale production infinitely. It'll be able to do it at speed and in theory be able to do it cost efficiently. So how do we start to maybe formally define or more formally define these different creative workflows, scale and storytelling? Because when we have infinite scale at speed and cost efficiency with that too, it almost seems like the holy grail. But how is it going to redefine a couple of things? One is like, what is the value of human creativity when we have infinite scale? Um, I think a related question is, what are the risks of letting AI take over workflows too quickly? So I think what I'm seeing a lot out there right now is that what I think of as like unproductive scale, even counterproductive scale, like AI is making it easy to press the easy button and be able to scale to infinite and beyond. But is that really perspective of, you know, connecting with our audience, resonating with them, building deep connections over time? Maybe that makes sense for like bottom of the funnel marketing and creative, where it's much more transactional. Um, but when we think about it from a brand point of view or top of funnel marketing and creative, is do we need to be asking ourselves, you know, are we maybe moving too quickly to simply reach for the easy AI button to scale and do it at speed? And are we creating unproductive or counterproductive scale and speed in the process? And I think the other thing I'm thinking about here related to that is how do we actually leverage AI to generate creative value for the audience? I think we often think about technology as like, how do we make it better for us? Like, how do we make it better and easier for us to like scale, go at speed, do it cost efficiently? But maybe the better question to be asking is how do we leverage AI to generate creative value? And that could be in the form of scale or speed. It could also be in the form of like more personalized storytelling, and you heard about that from Penri on the episode, or just better or new or different storytelling. Like, how are we going to leverage these AI tools to create value for the audience? And I think maybe that's something we should be asking ourselves at the same time that we're asking, how can AI help us? Um, so maybe it's that old John Kennedy quote. What was it again? Ask what you can do for your country. Maybe we should be asking, let's not ask what AI can do for us. Let's ask what AI can do for our audience. That might be the better question to be asking. And then the final thing I'm sort of noodling on, I'm just pulling out one of these questions from this list I've got here. Um, as AI, it's here, we're all going to be embedding it as part of defining what work is and how it gets done. And as we move towards like AI driven storytelling, how do we sort of like figure out what the right metrics are? And I've been thinking, and this has come up with some in some other recent episodes, there definitely needs to be more alignment and collaboration with marketing and their KPIs. And I think marketing, sort of going back to what I was talking about earlier about bottom of funnel versus top of funnel creative work, they also have sort of different KPIs at different parts of the funnel. So there's probably needs to be discussions and alignment there as well. So those are some of the questions that occurred to me. I hope they're valuable for you again in sort of helping you, prompting you to go from listen mode to thinking mode, either on your own with your team, your leadership, and then acting as sort of a launching pad into doing mode. If you want to talk about any of these with me, feel free to reach out. DM me on LinkedIn. If you have my email or phone number, feel free to email or text. Or if you want some of the other questions that I've jotted down since in the 2-3 days since speaking to Penri, more than happy to share those with you as well. All right, hope that's helpful. Talk to you folks soon.